Welcome. Do you have a power of attorney for your healthcare? Why is having a healthcare power of attorney so important? Only 30% of us have our paperwork, our power of attorney completed. And this month is National Healthcare Decisions Month. And I'm Kathleen, and I'm here with Maureen and Colleen. We work with end of life hot topics, and this is Maureen's wheelhouse. Maureen founded Radiant Morning basically mostly because of this. We are so lucky to have her expertise here today. She works with families and individuals to make sure that this work has been completed because she has seen firsthand why it's so important, because when it's not completed, it can be devastating to families. Maureen is an advocate for end-of-life planning, and when it occurs, it can make everything go so smoothly in a family. And when it doesn't occur, it can cause all kinds of problems. Maureen's goal is to create a community of families who are protected and empowered. She runs workshops, she does consultations, and facilitates family meetings. And she also does a tremendous amount of outreach and community education. So we're very excited to have her today to talk about these issues. So Maureen, I'm just going to hand it over to you.
Thanks so much, Kathleen. I am so excited to be here because this is such an important topic to me. As a nurse for, 38 years, I've seen firsthand what happens, the devastation at the bedside when these decisions are having to be made with no input at all from the person lying in the bed, and it causes conflict and fractured families, and it's so emotional that by getting this work done now, it's just such a gift. So as you stated, I call it National Healthcare Decisions Month, but on April 16th is National Healthcare Decisions Day. And this started back in 2008 by an attorney, a Virginia-based attorney named Nathan Kottkamp. And his whole mission was to have a clear, concise, and consistent way to get this work done for both individuals and for provider facilities, so that when you go to the hospital, there's a consistent method for getting your advanced directives uploaded with the hospital system. So National Healthcare Decisions Day is April 16th. It's always the day after tax day, because Benjamin Franklin said there's two things in life that are inevitable: death and taxes. So they decided April 16th because April 15th is tax day in America. But you don't actually have to pay your taxes. They'll come after you, they'll eventually get you, but you don't have to pay your taxes, but you will die. I mean, that is the inevitable in life. So the more that we can plan, the better off that we will be. So Nathan, the attorney that started this, when he was 20 years old, he actually completed his advanced directives. He was part of this healthcare advocacy group at college, I think, as I recall. And he thought, wow, this is important to do because, 20-year-olds have accidents. 20-year-olds have life events, the what if events in life. What if I have an accident? What if I have a drug overdose, things like that. Those are usually the things that occur with younger people. And he saw the need to get it done. So that was his driving passion years later, is to continue this work. In 2016, the Conversation Project took over National Healthcare Decisions Day, and they've been the driving force ever since. So the National Conversation Project is an amazing organization that's dedicated to getting advanced directives done also. So there's a little history on National Healthcare Decisions Day.
I was kind of impressed with Nathan. He was 20 years old, you said. So that's interesting to me, because Lance Armstrong, I think, and some other younger people like him, he was 25 or something, and he got his advanced directives together. What is the many young people don't want to do that because they don't think they're going to die. So what are the advantages of this, really? What do you
Well,
say to a younger person, you know?
anyone that's over 18, people say, when should you do your advanced directives? The day you turn 18, you are no longer um, you're no longer under your family's jurisdiction, let's say. Parents don't have access to medical records, medical care. It could be that something happens and parents can't get access. There was a story that I had heard about a college student. He was in his dorm room, his roommate walked in and he was unresponsive in the bed. Well, his parents were in California, he's in the Midwest, and the parents were not able to get any information from the hospital because he didn't have an advance directive. He didn't have that power of attorney um, figured out. He didn't have it completed, and he didn't have that legal document. And because of the HIPAA laws that protect patient privacy, they were unable to get information over the phone, and it was devastating. That's why you need it. This boy ended up dying. It turned out to be a heart arrhythmia, and but they had to fly back, which of course you would anyway as a parent, and really fight to get this information. So at a time of great emotion, it was so devastating for them that not knowing what was going on. Sometimes physicians won't be able to talk unless both parents are there. Let's say there's 18, 20, 24-year-old, but both parents would be considered the next of kin. So if only one's there, they oftentimes can't talk to them unless both of the next of kin are there. So this is why it is so important to get this work done. And how do you talk about it? Just say, you know, I want to talk to you about this. This is what I did with my sons. They were all like 19, 20 and early 20s. And I said, you know, I have something that's really important for me to discuss with you. And I think your dad and I would be on the same page if something happened to you. And I don't know that for sure, because we're going to be coming from a time of pure emotion. If something happens at that young age, it's usually, like I said, an accident, a drug overdose, maybe a failed suicide attempt. I mean, there's all these things, but I said, so it'll be pure emotion. And I want to make sure you have one person that can legally speak for you on your behalf. So we talked about it, and they got the paperwork done.
So a lot of people, I have an 18-year-old and I know her paperwork's not done. So Maureen, what's the easiest and quickest way? I think people get overwhelmed with the paperwork and, you know, think that they have to have a lawyer and all that kind of thing. So
Every state has power of attorney for healthcare documents, or they're called advanced directives. On you can Google, and in fact on our Facebook group I'll put a list of different the state power of attorney documents, but you can just go Google power of attorney document for Washington State, healthcare power of attorney document for Washington State or California or Maryland or wherever you live. Google those, pull it up, and then you have the document there. So it'll be the whole advance directive, not just the power of attorney for healthcare, but also the living will portion of it too. But you can do just the power of attorney for healthcare. If you do nothing else, just do that document so that someone can speak legally. So that's as easy as it gets. And then it needs to be witnessed by two people or notarized. Check with your state. We're in Washington State, so I know that's the rule in Washington. Some states might require witnessing and notarizing, but once you have it witnessed or notarized or both, it becomes legally binding.
okay. And then does it have to be updated regularly?
You can update it as often as you want by doing the same thing, pulling up that free document online and changing it. So it makes it so easy to do, but it's also so easy not to do.
Right, right. So when you're thinking about, you pulled up a really good, you know, example of talking to your sons. And so what qualities should someone look for in a healthcare power of attorney?
There's a lot. I'll also put how to choose a healthcare power of attorney PDF in our Facebook group. But I think there's, first of all, someone that's willing. someone that's willing to do it for you. Never choose someone and don't tell them. That's happened to me, and it was very hard, very stressful, and very emotional because we'd never talked about anything when the time came to exercise that. So ask someone to think about it. Ask them if they're willing to sit down and have these conversations with you, and make sure it's someone that you trust, to make decisions on your behalf, whether you've talked about a scenario or not, because things might come up that you've never talked about. And you want to make sure you trust them to make the right decision based on the things that you have talked about. And this is a very emotional responsibility to take on. And make sure that they're emotionally strong enough to handle this, because no matter what, no matter if they know your wishes, no matter all that you've talked about, when that time comes, it's still very emotional. So I'll share a quick story. My uncle, he was almost 88. He had driven from Palm Desert to Seattle 2 weeks prior to, he was back in Palm Desert by this time, that one morning he didn't wake up. And he was not dead, but he had a bleed into his head. And so I was his healthcare power of attorney. He chose me because he knew that his daughter, it would be too emotional for her. He felt that she had already experienced the death of 2 brothers and her mother, and he didn't want to put her in that position. So I had to talk to the neurosurgeon that wanted to evacuate his bleed. And I asked, will he be able to get back to his full functioning capacity, completing all his own activities of daily living, talking, living independently? And he said, no, but we can, there's like a 25% chance that we'll get in to be able to speak again. And I said, well, that's not good enough. And 5 times we had this conversation where he kept trying to get me to let him go in and evacuate the bleed. But I had a very clear path to follow. My uncle, we had talked about it frequently. The 2 weeks prior, when he was here visiting, we had conversations again, and it gave me the guide, but it was also very emotional. We thought this super active uncle would be active well into his 90s, and here this happened. So to have to stand up to that surgeon and say no over and over again was very difficult and very emotional.
You know, I want to go back. Well, it's the whole theme right here is the pick somebody who's emotionally strong. I think of my 2 sisters and how I had to choose which one is going to be my healthcare proxy. And knowing that my younger sister during my mother's death kind of bailed, and she just couldn't handle it. And she just has a hard time with death. And my other sister, who was a social worker, director of hospice, she's very willing to do that now. So that's going to be my choice, however, and is my choice. However, can you have what if they both had strength? Can you have like co-healthcare agents?
My personal belief is that it is a bad idea to have co-healthcare agents, because that would mean they would both have to agree. And in that time of emotion, it might not happen. I was put in that position. The person that never asked me made me a co-healthcare agent. It's called healthcare agent. The documents are power of attorney for healthcare. But the person and I did not agree on what should be done. And so that stymies everything, it puts everything to a halt because you both have to agree. So it was a very, very stressful position. So you should have your primary, the first person that can legally speak for you, and then you should always have a secondary, meaning that if that person, say the person you chose, it's too emotional for them and they want to step back, or say many people choose their spouse, and they will think, oh, my spouse or my oldest child or whatever it might be, that's who I'll have. That's who I'll choose. Well, let's say you and your spouse or your partner are driving and in a traffic accident, And then it becomes neither of you are able to make medical decisions on your behalf. So it would automatically go to the primary or the secondary healthcare power of attorney. So that's the importance of having at least two. Some people have three. Now, when you have, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I was asked to be a healthcare agent and I agreed. But then I asked, who is my backup? Because this person was just kind of somebody I didn't know real well, but I thought I could do this for them. But when they said, oh, there is no backup, they just said, I only know you. And you know what? I withdrew because without a backup, it doesn't work. And I agree, three. Yes.
Well, and the good thing about having a backup, that secondary and third area or whatever you call that, you can talk about it. So if you have a primary and a secondary, you should have a meeting with them and talk about your wishes, review all of your advance directives. And so you both know, or the three of you know, what this person's wishes are. So that if you're struggling with making a decision as the primary, you can say, hey, I need a little support. This is what I think I heard she said. And I know it's written this way, but let's talk about what we should do. So there is that support, but remember the primary is the one that makes the decisions.
Yeah, and I can see that being really advantageous, not being available. That's definitely happened in our family. Somebody was not reachable. So
Right.
to have the secondary there.
And even though we live in this global world now and people, it's easier to reach them virtually, it's always best case scenario is that your healthcare agent is local. I was not for my uncle. It worked very well. And if possible, it's best that they are local.
I can see that. So you can get a set of eyes on the person ASAP. Yeah, I agree. So now I'm just wondering what happens if there is no healthcare agent chosen? What if someone doesn't have a power of attorney?
If there's no healthcare agent chosen, then it goes by the next of kin. And I know in Washington state, we have a hierarchy of next of kin, spouse. First, it goes to the spouse. If there's no spouse and there are children, spouse or partner, I'm saying spouse, but it's spouse. Well, not always. If it's a partner, they're not married. There can be some conflict there. So it's the married spouse. Then it would go to children if there are children. The problem with these things, like going to children, if there's more than one child, all four children have to agree. I'm saying four because of a scenario in my head. All of the children have to agree. And that's where the emotions of the conflict and the family drama can come in. And so I was saying four because when I became passionate about people getting their healthcare power of attorney documents complete, it was probably close to 30 years ago. I took care of a woman that came into the ICU. She was 62 and she had been very active. Played tennis that morning, lunch with her mom, and driving her mom home, she slumped over the wheel with a major heart attack. Ended up on a ventilator in the ICU. And she had 4 children, no spouse. So 3 days later, they weaned her off sedation and she didn't wake up. And a brain scan showed that she was brain dead. Well, she had no healthcare agent, no one to make that decision for her. So it fell to her 4 children and they totally disagreed. And it caused so much conflict. It was like a war zone in that room. We had to limit it to one person at a time to be with her because there was so much fighting and disagreement and it was heartbreaking. And that's why the importance of getting that one person that can speak. So if it's not those children, then it goes to maybe parents or then siblings. And then down the line, nieces, nephews, there's long hierarchy. Oftentimes if people have no one, they have to petition the courts to get a legal guardian, which is time consuming and expensive. And that just causes more heartache for those involved. So each person should check with their own state or principality, if you're in Canada, to see what the hierarchy of next of kin is.
Mhm. I think that's important. And, is there an advantage? I mean, I know in the state of Washington, you can just download a very long form, if I'm not mistaken, and you can also have it. What do I want to say? Well, you can have it witnessed in the state of Washington. I think it has to be, but in some cases it's just optional. But they always say it's better to have somebody witness it. And I'm just wondering, are all states, can you just download this, advanced directives, or is it more advantageous to have a lawyer, or is there a time when it's more advantageous to have a lawyer?
I think, for me, best practice, I always think get your estate planning done. Go to the lawyer. But the problem is lawyers look at the documents from a legal standpoint. And so to talk to someone that has more expertise in the medical issues that pertain to the living will portion. But I think that, yes, attorneys are great because that's definitely legally binding then. And there can't be anyone contesting it if it is drafted by an attorney, although it is legally binding to do the documents, the healthcare power of attorney document, and have it witnessed or notarized.
Yeah.
But it's always best to review everything with an attorney also. Get the full meal deal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I keep thinking about, even if you do pick, we'll take the scenario of 4 children, like that woman, and they're arguing, like, even if you pick someone, you could still have, disagreements, but to have the paperwork, it would back you up. So I'm just thinking of this woman, like, how does she ask one of her children and not her other children? Or maybe I should ask you, because I only have one child. So how do you
Well,
figure that out?
that is where the conversation comes in and is so, so important. So think about if you have one child. So I have one of my 3 children as a secondary. My spouse is my first, and I have a secondary power of attorney healthcare agent is my oldest son. So I sat down with him, asked him if he was willing to review everything and go over it with me. And he was. Then we had a family meeting. I got all the family together and I went over everything. And I talked about why I had made the decisions I had made. And I also talked about why I had chosen my oldest son. And I wanted them to know right from me why he was chosen. And I thought the others were too young at the time. And I didn't want to place them in that position. I was struggling between choosing a close friend and my oldest son. And after talking to him, I gave him the option of not doing it or doing it. I said, this is just, I want to have this conversation to see where you would be at. So he said, after we went over everything, he's like, no, Mom, I think I could do this because you're telling me exactly what to do. So I think that it's so important to tell them why you've chosen.
Yeah.
So as another story, I love telling stories. I worked with a nurse who her mom chose her sister, who was not a nurse, was not in the medical field, to be her primary healthcare agent. And she chose my friend to be her secondary. Well, I knew this family. I knew the mom and the older sister and my friend. And my friend was very upset. She's like, what? I should be the power of attorney for healthcare. I should be making those decisions. I'm the one with the medical knowledge. And I said, but you're also highly emotional. And your sister can compartmentalize things. She was really good at just looking at the moment at hand and making decisions. And I said, your mom knows that about her, and she knows that you're highly emotional. So she needs you at her bedside, rubbing her feet and loving on her and being emotional and taking care of all of her emotional and spiritual needs, while she needs your sister to be in the role to be able to say to the doctors, this is what my mother's wishes are. This is what she would want done. This is why I'm saying this. So after we had that conversation, she's like, oh, I guess I never really thought of it that way. And I said, your role is just as important, because we all have a role to play. And by having these conversations with those that matter most to us, when we're making these decisions, it gives them their roles to play. Yeah.
Yeah, well, this is so important. I just keep thinking about how my paperwork needs to be updated, like just reviewing it regularly and having those discussions, especially like having the advantage, like Colleen said, of going through a couple of family deaths and seeing how it's gone. So
That yearly update, I agree, Kathleen, is so important. Kathleen and Maureen. I was just thinking, what if things change? I mean, you have it set, and then, well, say somebody unfortunately dies or becomes ill, then you have to change it. But what if the relationships may change, and you may decide, no, I can't have that person. They may not even follow my wishes because we had a falling out. So
Right.
there's all kinds of tricky things, but also, and there's other things too, but yearly, I agree.
I always say, to give it, review your documents during your birthday month. Make it your birthday gift to yourself. And you brought up something that was really important, that they might die. But what if you choose someone, and then over time, like, let's say you choose someone and then you decide, I really think that if my time came, I'd want medical assistance in dying. It's legal here in
Mhm.
Washington state, but the person that's your primary healthcare agent is completely opposed to that. And so you have to have that conversation and say, this is what I'm changing on my power of attorney document. Are you able to honor that? And if they're not, then you have to choose someone else,
That
because
is, yeah. No,
that's
go ahead.
that's a really tricky one. So you want to make sure you have someone that can honor your wishes, even if they don't agree with them.
Yeah. That's a really important point, because now this medically assisted is becoming more known to the public, and there's books written on it. And uh, Diane Rehm, who used to be a former NPR speaker host, she wrote a book, When My Time Comes, and it's just that kind of thing. People now are looking at that. And when I changed from cremation to human composting, I had to tell my sisters, who were all for it, thank goodness.
Yeah, I know. That's why keep having these conversations, keep talking to people about your wishes. So, um, gosh, I can't believe there's so much more to talk about on the power of attorney document part, but I do want to start thinking about wrapping this up. So I hope that the takeaways that I hope people walk away with from this show are, the first, that now is the time to choose a healthcare agent, because we don't know when that what if in life will happen. We don't know if we're going to walk out that door, be in an accident, and be unable to make our own decisions. So we want someone that we trust. Another takeaway is, if you don't have a chosen healthcare agent legally documented, it ends up being the next of kin. And that can present issues if your next of kin don't agree. So you want that one person. And the secondary, choose someone who will honor your wishes, not theirs, not how they would do it, but yours, because you've talked it through. Just like my uncle gave me that great roadmap, because we'd talked it through so many times that I knew exactly what was acceptable and not acceptable for him. And then what we were just talking about, that you can change your healthcare agent anytime you want. This is our story that we get to write, and we get to edit it anytime we want. As things change, as we have a new diagnosis, as we think that maybe that friend isn't the person we want anymore, or that we're in conflict with our family member that's our healthcare agent. So just review these things annually and make sure, or more often if there's a change.
Wow, our time has flown, and we've enjoyed talking about this tough challenge today. Join us on our Facebook page, Challenging Conversations, and just search for Challenging Conversations and join us there, and let us know what taboo topics or challenging things you want to know, because we will discuss them, and we have been discussing them based on some of your recommendations. So what are we going to be discussing next week? Well, we're going to be talking about the living will portion of the advance directive and how to decide what medical treatment you might want or not want if you become unable to make decisions for yourself. So we will see you next week on Challenging Conversations at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I just want to say, please stay after for a continuing conversation with us, and we would be glad to answer your questions or discuss. My name is Colleen Hughes, and I'm an end-of-life care doula and conscious dying educator.
And we have Kathleen Putnam with us.
Yeah, and I'm Kathleen Putnam, and I am a registered dietitian and end-of-life doula and a grief coach. And I have a practice, Nutrition Works, and No More Food Trauma.
And I'm Maureen Curis with Radiant Morning. So we'll see you all next week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.